Hello, beautiful creatures. This is going to be a playthrough of Embers of Magic. According to the free Steam page, it says it is a short adventure visual novel that tells the story of Liana the Witch. She takes an airship down to the surface of the dangerous and corrupt earth beneath her flying city home. So let's see this beautiful land. First, gonna put it in full screen, cut out my background, and start game.
I thought you said that looking down there made you sad. The melancholy of seeing the ruins of the old world or something?
Titus sat next to her, slipping his legs off the edge as well, placing his walking staff beside him.
Not today. Today it's clear and I can see the greens and yellows and oranges. And the colors of life. Not just the blues of the ocean or the white of the clouds.
Once she had looked up and marveled at their beauty, but now the condensed water vapors were little more than a source of irritation. Below them was Wine Basin, the largest island in the winding archipelago. Liana glanced to her side, surveying her friend instead of the view below her. View far below. I cannot get my words right today.
Do you ever wish we could go back down there?
Not really. Not if it's anything like how we left it.
There's no way it's still so dangerous. The magic must have begun to settle by now.
I'm sure that's what the last view to go down there said, and yet they never returned.
Have you considered that they might have simply decided to stay?
I suppose you could argue that they decided to become part of the circle of life. Getting eaten by a monster would definitely be a reason to stay.
Hee hee hee. Liana groaned at the joke, kicking her feet.
You don't know that. Why can't we just make the city, I don't know, go a bit lower? Take a quick peek.
Unlike you, the council has a strong sense of self-preservation.
You mean they're boring?
We may be boring, but at least we're alive. It's more than can be said of the billions lost down there. It's not so bad here. Even compared to the world we knew before, this place is a wonder. A breathtaking view, fresh food in abundance, and magic of a power beyond anything we knew before.
And in the end, it's still nothing but a prison. I miss the earth. I need to feel rough ground beneath me, rocks under my toes, and plants that weren't carefully cultivated in neat rows by a legion of professional gardeners. Not to mention animals. I miss wildlife.
I am perfectly content with not meeting the wildlife down there.
Stolas is wildlife.
And he was likely born on Terrath.
No, he wasn't.
A small trip noise came from Liana's hair.
I doubt it. I wasn't able to find evidence of a single other owl living up here.
Oh, it's so cute! As though on cue, a tiny owl that seemed made entirely of eyes waddled to just under her neck and nibbled at her hair.
If he wasn't born here, then it means he came from somewhere else.
His parents probably live under a house you've never been to. Some owls can burrow, you know.
I suppose he could be classified in the Athene family.
She sounded unsure. He had colors on him that no owl should rightly have. Not that they were not lovely colors. Maybe the magic that had created the horrors below had also created new life. It was a fragile hope.
I've mapped every area that isn't paved. I've scaled every height in Terrath, even the underside. I think that after 100 years, I would have a good sense of what kind of wildlife we had.
You know that Professor Tulleth still blames you for the loss of the Eastern Tower.
Oh no.
And I still say it wasn't my fault.
Below them, the world drifted past.
It's just not fair when there's so much beneath us that we're exiled to this tiny speck of floating rock.
Some say it's better than we deserve.
The two sat in silence for a time, Liana staring, unfocused, at the earth far below them as warm breezes tickled her face and Stalis puffed into ball mode to sleep. Time passed. Liana couldn't begin to say how long. She just took in the rolling world beneath.
Didn't you say you hated looking at the ruins?
She blinked, Stalis perking up.
What?
She turned to Titus and then followed his gaze back to where hers had only just lay. Her eyebrows furrowed as her brain struggled to absorb the original information it was receiving. There, far beneath her, was an enormous stone pyramid. Ruins were not an uncommon sight on the clear days where one could see the world below. After all, with a population in the billions, there were few places that humans hadn't lived. But these ruins didn't seem right. Was it their location? Where was this exactly anyway? That was when it clicked.
Those aren't ruins.
The blood rushing through her veins felt like white water rapids in her ears.
That's a new construction, Titus.
The man grunted as Liana shuffled desperately to her feet, Stolas hooting.
Titus, that's new. Those aren't ruins. It had to have been built after the rupture.
Liana, that's impossible.
But she was already tugging her huge journal, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing.
I have to see it.
Liana, how are you even going to get down there?
Without a response, beyond a ripping sound and a panicked hoot from Stalis, Liana was gone, bare feet slapping the cobblestone as she pounded down the street, down the stairs, and out of his sight. Titus stared after her, his mouth half open. With a small laugh, he shrugged to himself, laying one hand on Liana's boots.
Can't let her leave without these.
And wiped his hands on his overalls. What was this? The 5th or 6th layer of wood treatment? He doubted any ship needed that much lacquer. It was more than lacquer, too. He had found the materials for the spell in one of the older books in the abandoned library. He let out a long, pained sigh. Anne watched as the slack lines whipped in the wind. Once again, he released a long sigh. How long would it be before he could unfurl the sails?
Anne!
Anne jumped so high he nearly cleared the railings off the ship. Fortunately, he had the fitness to make the action seem purposeful, striking the heels of his boots hard onto the rail and completing the maneuver with an elaborate flourish as he turned about.
Why, hello there, missy.
Who the devil was she anyway?
Anne, I need you to let me sail with you.
For a moment, Anne only met her gaze in silence, trying to judge to see if the girl was serious. Instead of any hint of a mocking tone, he found in her eyes and voice only urgency.
Do you know what you'd be asking of me, lass?
Wow, you're really serious about the whole pirate thing, aren't you?
Anne ignored the question, as Liana's eyes still met his with the fierceness that he had never found from the ones who came here to mock him.
Aye, but I could be asking you the same.
Below us, there's some kind of structure, but it's new. If we don't leave immediately, we'll drift too far past it to ever find it again easily. You have the only prepped airship. Mines. I bet you've got the only functional airship at this point.
Anne met her gaze, measuring the steel in her eyes.
Then we'd best be off quick as a gibbet. I just be needing 5 minutes and 23 seconds before we set up.
That was oddly specific. Anne flourished into an elaborate bow before breaking off into a desperate run. Liana blinked after the man, stunned that anyone had agreed to her request, much less with so little argument. Where the nines was he going anyway? The pirate turned a corner so sharply Liana thought he might topple and was gone from sight. Taking the time to assess the ship, Liana pulled out her journal. It was habit, if not pure instinct, now, that made her begin making notations in her journal. She recorded details of the docks, the weather, and the ship. Aw, cute little birdie. The ship was moored in a skyship dock, mounted 3 feet from the ground. She noted it wasn't flying yet, as she counted the windows. Every once in a while, her eyes flicked downwards towards the spiraling sea of clouds that now concealed the lands below. She was halfway through a quick sketch of the main mast when a thump made her spin around.
That wasn't even 4 minutes.
Titus cocked an eyebrow as he struggled to catch his breath. Her boots were by her side, and a pair of boot prints marred the otherwise spotless side of the ship. Idly, she wiggled her toes, just now realizing that they were bare.
Oh, thanks.
Scooping up the boot, she walked over to him and leaned against the side of the ship as she slipped them on. Striking a needlessly epic pose, Liana adopted a feigned, serious tone.
I'll be flying soon. Lost to the long sky.
She waited for the breezes which plagued the shipyards to blow her hair for effect, but it only managed to whip it in her face and get several strands stuck in her mouth. Yeah, that sounds about the reality of it.
Flying? On Ant's ship? The kid is a loon. He thinks he's a pirate.
That's a bad thing? He was looking at the ship critically.
Not to mention it would take more sky lilies than anyone is allowed to requisition in a year to fly this thing. It's made almost entirely out of oak.
Narrowing his eyes and examining it more critically, Titus muttered to himself.
Bamboo probably would have been a better choice. Lighter.
Not if you land in the ocean.
Maybe balsa if...
Titus,
Sorry, what?
come with me.
Liana lowered her sketchbook, standing straight and meeting the older witch's gaze. Titus' eyes fell on the ship. He seemed to take it all in, and a light sparkled in his eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought he looked tempted. And then it was gone.
You know I can't.
Titus rapped the hull with his staff.
Even if Anne could get it to fly.
Liana smirked as she added a note to her sketch of Titus. Very serious, it read.
Ever a slave to duty.
Someone has to be. The council is content with just surviving. When the power systems failed, we lost most of the archives of magic. All we have left is books, and most people don't even know where the library is. I have a real chance to change things, Liana.
As an afterthought, she added, wears way too much orange, as a final note. No, that is my favorite color. There is not too much orange, unless you're in an orange jumpsuit. Then that might be a little much. Needs something added. Like some really pretty, what are they called? Those embroidered patches. That's what it is. Need that all over the suit. Then I'd make it look fine. A commotion in the distance prompted her to close the book.
Make sure they get some practical experience. You can't learn everything from books.
True. Liana grinned at Titus, and they shared a smile. The commotion seemed to grow louder, and she looked behind Titus to see a figure sprinting at an impossible speed, tearing towards the ship. It was Anne, or at least she assumed it was. Beyond the distinctive boots, there was little to see beyond a cloud of uprooted sky lilies. Oh, goodness. Several healthy built witch guards were close on his tail. No, that truly didn't give Anne justice. They were certainly following it, at least, but the way the man moved. Liana wondered what spell the pirate witch had used.
Halt! Stop that man!
Thief!
Thief!
Stalas hooted softly, dancing in that odd way owls do.
Wahoo, lassie! Skim the word for we be cutting air.
She wondered if those were actual words. Dropping her journal, which swung on thick cords around her waist, she began untying the ship from the dock.
You can't be serious.
I am untying the ship. I am being most serious.
Watch my garden for me.
Liana was halfway done with the thick rope.
Mrs. Cooper has 3 of my books. Make sure she returns them or puts them in the library or something.
Liana, you're not going to be gone that long, surely.
Better be safe than sorry.
She'll swear she only has 2 because the other has risque content, but it's the only known copy, so you better give it back.
Of course you want to keep that book. Anne struck the deck with enough force to shake the ship, causing Titus to fight for balance in his wake.
Halt! Stop him!
Uh-oh. Titus spun around, his face a contorted mask of guilt and uncertainty, and flew below deck with such speed Liana would have thought him to have fallen if not for the cadence of his footsteps. Liana wasn't sure what the captain was doing, but made haste to unfurl the sails.
The blue blasters? The flowers that look like morning glories need to be sprayed with lemon water twice a day.
And returned as abruptly as he had left, no longer holding an armload of sky lilies, his face a manic grin. Titus stepped towards the ship, his hand outstretched toward Liana, at a complete loss for words. He looked near tears, and Liana's heart wrenched with its own guilt. The pirate had one hand on the ship's wheel as the ship lurched unnaturally.
And Titus?
He spun the wheel hard to one side.
Sorry things didn't work out.
Oh. The airship suddenly tilted to the side as though toppling over, falling off the side of the island like a rock. The swamp bubbled and popped as Babby watched. It smelled foul. Babby had always just assumed that age made one smell gross. He was beginning to realize that the reason Grandpa smelled so bad was because all of the time he spent here.
Come on, boy. We won't catch a thing if you dawdle the way you are. The early bird gets the worm. Woohoo!
Aren't we after fish?
Ooh, I love how these are drawn. The colors are beautiful.
It's an expression.
It was also past midday when we set out.
Oh, don't trip over tiny details like that, Bobby. Today, we shall lure the greatest catch of all. Woo! The whale boat!
The man was beyond senile. Babby looked into the musk of the swamp water and noted how shallow it was. He knew what a whale was. He had seen them off the coast of the Spires. He knew one could never live in water like this, bold or otherwise. He sighed as he trudged after the dodgering old bird.
Today's the day! Ooh, I can smell it on the wind!
You sure that's what you're smelling? Liana struggled to pull her hands free of the rigging as Stalas complained, her white knuckle grip seeming to have cemented during the descent. Anne seemed none the worse for wear. His difficulties with getting the ship to properly fly instead of plummeting towards certain death had seemed a little more concern to him than picking a beverage to accompany breakfast. Speaking of which, she had lost hers. She was thankful that it had flown outwards during the death spiral and splattered neither her nor the spotless deck.
Ho ho, that was a bit of fun, weren't it? Now we've got to dip into the pontoon of that there fog bank and parry the wind for our course.
Liana was convinced now, if she hadn't been before, that the want-to-be pirate had little to no idea what he was saying.
Do you have any idea where we're going, Anne?
Ha 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 ha! Nary a clue, lass. We're going to sort in low and scout out for your ruins. Do it slow, like, lest we scuttle ourselves against them.
Liana nodded. She took a moment to examine the ship. She could feel the magic bound to the hull. Some sort of reinforcement, she guessed, and another spell. The second was likely whatever let it fly. A modification of the spell that was supposedly once used to grant flight to brooms. Oh, that was a question. A modification of the spell that was supposedly once used to grant flight to brooms? Liana knew a similar spell fueled the flight of the island, but it had never been something she had particularly researched. She regretted that now. The ship shifted hard as the pirate turned the wheel, banking them lower. She stumbled before catching herself on the railing. The pirate captain stood as steady as a stone. She felt out, drawing in a fraction of the magic on him, trying to identify what kept him so steady. She couldn't recognize a single aspect of the spell. Spiraling stars. Had the man been developing his own magic? Guilt struck her. He was more than half her age, though he didn't look it, and he apparently had a better grasp of magic than she did if he was already developing new spells. Her careful and intimately memorized catalog of every known spell seemed useless before someone who had created their own.
This is going to be quite the rocky ducking, lass.
Huh?
Liana didn't have a chance to fully digest the statement when the ship lurched out from beneath her, abruptly stopping while she did not. Her arm cracked sharply against the bow as she tumbled over it. Grandpa sat stock still. He had found a tree, and upon declaring the location perfect for fishing, cast his line. The hook now hung, free of any form of bait, 20 feet in the air, dangling from a branch. It had been there for at least 2 hours. Grandpa's pale eyes stared up at the bob with expectation on his face. The rod held happily with one gnarled foot. Babby could only sigh and watch.
How long do you think?
Babby fidgeted. The whole point of the no talking, you'll scare the fish rule is just the parents or grandparents just did not want to talk. It had nothing to do about scaring the fish.
Are you hungry?
But Babby finished weakly. And so he sat beside the old bird, crossing his wings moodily.
Don't fidget so, little one. This will never get a bite.
It was sad to see such a great bird descend so far into senility. Watching over him was the least Babby could do for the elder. It didn't mean he was going to enjoy it, though. Grandpa was the reason that the harpies had survived following the rapture. Of course, Babby hadn't been there. His dad had, though. He let out a long sigh. Grandpa shot him a look. Babby looked away and watched the fog as it curled, his mind playing at shapes in the mist. For a moment he swore he saw a form running through them, when the crack of a branch turned his head to Grandpa's tree. He caught only a glimpse as an immense shape glided like a whale between the waves and the sea of fog. The branch from which the lure had hung was gone. The lure snared on whatever had passed. The old bird's line spun wildly as it extended further and further, a beaming smile of delight playing across Grandpa's face. The old bird braced himself, ready to pull hard on the uncoiling line. Babby stared in horror as the line unwound almost to the spool as he stepped forward. He snatched the rod from the elder's hands and barely tossed it aside before the line went taut and the rod whipped away into the swirling mists of the swamp.
Oh no! Now we have to go find my rod. Might have to catch the whalebone by hand.
Oh goodness.
What was that? The whalebone. It's a type of capote. It soars to the skies.
He seemed troubled for a moment.
No, I can't remember what a capote is. I just know that I need the scales of a whalebone for my tea. I need to clear my head, boy.
The old bird began to waddle off after his rod, his feathers trailing in the mud. Babby watched, wide-eyed, as the elder walked. Then, with a resigned sigh, he followed. As the world had tumbled, she swore that the pirate had barely flinched during the impact, still gripping the mast. Tearing herself free of the muddy pool that she had landed in, she looked down at her filthy clothes.
You still breathing, lass?
Has she just said I?
Whoop.
Heavy boots struck the ground beside her as she scraped at the mud which clung to her face and clothes.
Yeah, I be having a change of clothes, if you be needing it.
Well, I guess if that's the least you can do. Leanna imagined herself in the pirate costume the captain wore.
No, that's alright.
Don't blame her. It's a bit airy in front. She would deal with the mud for now.
Is there a reason you crashed the ship?
Aye, it'd be my first time taking her skyward.
Leanna considered snapping at him for bringing her on the ship's maiden voyage, but considering she had practically begged him to take her, she thought better of it.
Is it still, skyworthy?
Probably aye. Need to give her a glance over the bilge to make sure her hull tain't breached. But aye, we'll be skyward again in no time.
Good. I think.
She still wasn't sure if he was using half of the words correctly.
If you're going to check the ship, I think I'll go out and scout around a bit. See if I can find something to point us in the right direction.
Leanna reached into the pouches at her side, ginger, cayenne, and ginkgo. The herbs were dried and preserved, but as she inhaled, she still drew power from them. She inhaled their essence a second time, an advanced technique. She wondered if the pirate could do it, and then let the gray dust of their remains fall from her open palm. It took a few moments for the spell to take effect. The dark of the thick fog bank grew brighter, not that it aided in visibility, but her ears began to pick up movement, though distant. The air was moist, and the smell and taste were exactly what one might expect in a swamp like this, the staleness leaving a foul flavor on her tongue.
I'll be back.
Brushing off as much of the remaining mud as she could, she stepped into the soupy fog and was gone. Anne scratched at his beard, shrugged, and made quick to check his ship. A tune began to rattle in his head. Dare he sing it? Since birth he had heard nothing but tales of the horrors that lived beneath the sky, the terrors that stalked the land below.
Nah, bugger it.
Oh, I once knew a lass, and her name was Ash, and her skin was fair and pale. And though she nearly had a care from her toes to her hair, she's the hero of this tale.
The words came to him on a whim, each line writing itself as it was sung. Of course, he didn't know anyone named Ash, but it made for a jaunty tune.
On her hand was a mark, in her heart was a spark, a phoenix set to flame. But her heart wasn't true. She confessed to a prude, and her life felt rather lame. Sally ho, here we go. Adventure is for thee. Sally ho, here we go. A love you won't know, you'll see.
The crack of a branch cut his song short as he turned around. Something darkened the edge of the fog, and what looked like an array of jewels reflected the dim light from the ship's lantern.
Huh. Well, would you look at that?
The darkness surged forward. Cliffhanger. Liana was glad she had at least worn good boots, but between the mud and the fact she had failed to wear proper exploration gear, she was feeling a great deal of discomfort. She had been marking her path with firefly lights, dandelions, sunflower seeds, and a pinch of rose to color them red, and trying her best to leave them at consistent intervals. She couldn't quite see how many she had left in her wake, but it had easily been half an hour since she had started walking. She had told herself more than once that she would walk just a single additional interval and then head back, but that had been easily 40 intervals ago. The alien-looking flora kept catching her eye, and she would crouch down to record it in her journal. She did so again, gently, running her fingers down the plant's long leaves to feel their texture. Biting the end of her pencil, she thought for a moment before writing.
Plant named Cat Scratches has a faintly spicy undertone, waxy exterior.
Cat scratches? Frog farts? What? She needs different names. Oh, that was so cute. The small owl hopped off of her shoulder and onto the roots of a tree, which were peeking out from beneath a shallow pool. His eyes were wide as he cooed insistently.
You want to pick something for me?
Stulis let out an excited proop. A wide array of plants were growing where Stalis was dancing. Liana saw a puff of orange flowers, a luminescent mushroom that looked like it had bred into a jellyfish. Bred with a jellyfish, and a few sprigs of frog farts and cat scratches.
Okay, well, let's see.
Which plant should Stalis grab? Well, considering that use the herbs for a lot of magical work, I would grab those first. Oh no! Give your muscles a chance to relax. Take a short break. Okay, back to game.
Definitely the frog farts.
Upon retrieval of the herbs, Stalis hopped back to her, and she helped him put the herbs into one of her many pouches for the purpose.
Very nice.
The witch grinned before turning back to her exploration. Liana told herself she should head back, but something, an instinct, drove her forward. Oh no! Her foot got stuck in another mud pool. She felt especially driven when that happened. With a grunt, she unwrenched her foot free. I cannot talk today. There was something just ahead. She was sure of it. And then, there it was. As though the fog had shifted solely to make the reveal, a monolith stone pyramid rested before her, not half another interval ahead of her, of where she stood.
Wow.
Stalis cooed softly. The stones were freshly cut, neatly too. The edges were practically sharp. The sides and plateaus of each level were near sheer. These looked like they may have been cut with tools of the old world. though she conceded with enough care and time the same effect could have been achieved with a simple chisel. She wasn't one to jump to conclusions. Liana brushed a hand against the surface and all at once felt something alien. Magic so unfamiliar she recoiled. Images of ancient aliens sprung to her mind, but she mentally stomped them out. She refused to even entertain such fancies. A walk of the perimeter of the building took her half as long as it had taken her to find it. It was enormous, and where had this much stone been found? In the middle of a swamp. She mapped the outside, marking the entrance she had chosen to pass on her first lap before returning to it. A shiver ran through her spine as she stared into the darkness, even her enhanced senses failing to penetrate far.
Don't shy back now, Liana.
She reached into her satchel and withdrew a fistful of dandelions. It was far from the most efficient light spell, but seeing as dandelions could replace any component in sufficient quantity, and they were as plentiful as, well, dandelions, she thought it better to save her rarer components for more demanding spells. She drew in the magic, once again, drawing in twice, before exhaling onto her pen, lacking anything else handy. With a guarded breath, she stepped forward into the dark. Ooh. Anne never really got a good look at whatever had captured him. Somehow he had felt no fear as he had been grasped by a seething mass of tiny hands and carried off into the swamp. Anne wondered if his lack of fear was due to his being a rather poor judge of character or an excellent judge. It had been always so difficult to get a read on other witches. Perhaps he had a knack for swamp monsters? The efficiency with which the creature, or perhaps creatures, carried him was remarkable. Despite the apparent lack of height, he rarely felt any part of him touch earth, even with the bag, apparently made of a lizard skin of some sort, over his head. He could tell they were traveling quickly. The creature or creatures would stop occasionally, however, and through the scales of the bag, Anne could see a faint red glow that floated softly on the air. Oh, that's her little lantern she left behind. That voice is so cute. A high-pitched, guttural chittering sounded as a pair of hands let go and he heard an excited clapping, as though the creature were trying to catch the lights.
Do ye be liking them?
More of the guttural chittering. Seems there were several creatures.
It be magic.
Guttural chittering again.
Magic.
Magics.
Cute. Anne started. Did the creatures understand?
Do ye be wanting magic?
Magics.
I think I can be helping ye there.
Interesting. The further she got inside, the more Liana realized how immense the complex was. The insides grew larger, each set of stones seeming to pull away from her, until the light she cast was no more than a tiny pool of light beneath her feet, and the walls beyond her pen's reach. Her footsteps echoed until she could tell she was in an enormous chamber. Liana needed to see more. She reached to her pouches, groping for the materials for a stronger light spell. Something scraped against the stone. Something immense. Liana shifted her hands, drawing the herbs for a more offensive magic.
Who are you? I had thought all the humans were dead. Or at least weren't human anymore.
Slowly, it came into view. Liana's jaw dropped in recognition. It was a dinosaur skull.
How?
The creature sniffed the air.
Such an array of plants. A witch. I had thought the humans had burnt and drowned your kind into extinction, long before I had perished.
Dallas made a soft noise.
How?
Liana cursed herself for her now monosyllabic and vocabulary.
Who are you? What are you?
Necromancy. Or a flavor of it. It's a rather consistent magic, you know, across many worlds. As for the who, I am what you might call a mother. I was still for a long time. And it will not be long before I am still once more. My clutch will be alone. And industrious as they are, they know nothing of the world.
I'm starting to get the impression I'm in the same boat.
Liana drew in a breath of the magic surrounding her. She could taste the necromancy the creature spoke of. Spiraling stars. What kind of spell could produce something like that? The creature shifted, agitated.
Tell me, witch, how old are you?
122. Almost exactly.
Then you were here when the world awakened once more. When the magics that animated my bones to protect my clutch stirred, and they too began to develop for the first time in millennia.
Yes, I was there. I was there when it happened. I was barely done being a student. It was my first job, a researcher for a prestigious lab. Our work was supposed to give us access to magic beyond anything any witch could harness at the time. I was in a hazard suit, directly beside the machinery, activating spells and devices at the command of my seniors. I was there when it happened. I was the one who opened the rupture.
Why had she confessed to that?
Then I thank you, witch. You gave my children a life they could not have had in the world before.
And what of the lives lost?
Death comes for us all. Even me. Even now.
That's it? Just people die? All those people dead because of me.
You cannot save the lives lost to the rupture, as you call it. So I ask you, instead, to consider the lives you can save now. I can sense it in you. A truly awesome power. Do you choose to hide that flame, in penance of how you obtained it? Or do you choose to protect this world you've created?
I can't... I mean... I don't even know where to begin.
I am afraid I can offer you no guidance there. My time is over. Your presence hastening the end of my spell. Please, help my children to live in your world. One day, they will help you to live in it as well.
Without another word, the skull clattered to the ground, and a cacophony of bones sounded as an entire skeleton collapsed. Liana stepped forward, casting her meager light over the still form. Though the head had been familiar, that of a dinosaur, every other bone seemed an alien to her, and as the light flickered, she could see enormous wings.
Spiraling stars.
Oh no, him again. Oh my goodness.
Ship! Rocka! Ship!
I told you it'd be faster to fly.
Oh, cute! Several dozen of the oversized lizards clung to every part of his ship. He wondered exactly how many there were. So he just left her. Goodness. They chittered excitedly, occasionally shouting in unison, "Ship!" or once in a while, "Boat!"
Budgie!
One who had spoken first and another rather colorful companion stood at Anne's side, waving their arms wildly as the ship gently curved through the air. Anne was already getting a hang of controlling the ship, and found himself banking gently left and right to help control his speed with the sails. The expediency with which the creatures seemed to pick up his language delighted Anne. Silently, he wondered if he could recruit them as crew. The wide, colorful ones sent up a gout of flame, nearly catching the sails.
Bugger me! Don't be doing that, laddies. Oh, ladies. I reckon I can't quite tell.
They seemed to ignore him, as all at once flames erupted in every direction, thankfully away from the ship. They lit the night and burnt away the fog, revealing the enormous ziggurat long before Anne needed to crash to avoid it.
Ye be quite handy to have around. How ye feel about becoming me mates?
Goodness. Aww. Anne pulled the ship in low, barely scraping the mud as he came in close and stilled the ship. They're trying. The three seemed to be talking. A parade followed Anne as he leapt off the ship and began to circle the structure, clearly not the ruin he had expected, and found the entrance. A thin set of footprints led inside. He reached to the cutlass at his side. He turned to find the critters wielding everything from sticks to long leaves, in imitation of him. How cute. Anne shrugged and led them inside.
So tell me, ickle wee ones, is this place your doing?
He gestured to the structure as he began to sneak silently inside.
Mates.
Rocka! Mats!
So cute.
Ah, so this be your den? I expect my companion to be inside. I hope she didn't pick no trouble with your mates.
Mates.
Mutties!
Are ye be getting it, ya little rapscallion?
Rascallion!
Oh my goodness.
Rascallion!
Eh, close enough.
So cute. Anne dared not light a torch, lest he reveal the approach of himself and his companions, a dangerous prospect considering he had no idea what was inside. He could likely hold his own, but his companions seemed like children, and he wasn't the type to risk children. It took him a few minutes of careful sneaking to come upon a light in the middle of an enormous room, revealing the bones of a massive winged beast and the distraught figure of Liana.
Haha, I found me matey me hearties.
Goodness.
My tears!
My tears.
Me hearties!
Perfect.
Eh, close enough.
Anne?
She sounded as distraught as she looked, and her owl mirrored the mood.
Are ye okay, lass? What be that beast?
The tiny creatures looked past him, staring not at Liana, but the bones beneath her. They chittered, though Anne could pick up that they were repeating the same noise.
Karaka chikaka chiki?
All the creatures turned to him. It seemed to ask, looking at him.
How could I say no? Karajakis.
The creatures turned to Leanna, who was halfway to writing a new entry in her journal.
I think I'm supposed to be their Kara Kachi Kachi Kian.
Ha! Somehow I don't think you be the mother in type, lass.
What, and you are?
Oh, aye.
The two stared at each other, only turning when a pair of footsteps began making their way, echoing through the enormous chamber.
Come, my boy. The great whale boat lies within.
Oh no.
Grandfather, they're...
The voices stopped abruptly as Anne and Leanna found themselves face to face with the odd feathered beings.
Well, I'll be. Looks like someone already caught the whale boat. And stripped him as you please, too. Ooh, a pity. A pity. Well, come on, Bobby. No time to gawk. Time to head home.
But Grandfather, what are all these?
Ooh, doesn't matter. Off we go.
With that, the old bird-like creature trotted back out the way he had come. The younger creature stared. His eyes were locked on Anne, then Leanna, and finally the lizards for easily a full minute before a voice from outside called.
Best be following me if you don't want to be lost in this fog.
With a reluctant turn, the young harpy scampered away.
Anne, do you know what this means?
Oh, aye. It means I can recruit a whole menagerie to crew me ship. Not merely all the baby beasts.
Leanna turned to him, her eyes alight. Anne was shocked at the fire in them. He swore that in that dim light they burnt with an actual luminescence.
There were other survivors.
The end.
And that, my friends, is how I learned to speak a human.
Everyone merely stared at the kobold, their eyes wide.
I told you that I was from a flying island.
Oh my goodness. That was cute. I could have saw them even going to see more creatures and then going back and telling the council. So, or like the mother dragon said, or creature, that she would be able to use her strong flame to be able to help everyone in the world that she created. Thanks for playing. That was super cute. I really liked what they did. Let's see. Whoops, I'm clicking on my other screen. Developer Aihaku Labs. Indie visual novel, casual action. Yep, so that was Embers of Magic. It is free on Steam. I thank you guys for going through the little adventure with me, meeting all those kooky characters. And I will see you beautiful creatures later. Have a great day.